Hello? Okay, good. Hi. Please allow me to start with a personal story of mine to tell you how this journey actually began. So in 2010, I was visiting the city of Kalamata. I was visiting my grandfather. Oops. No? Sorry. Maybe it needs a fakilaki. So that's my grandfather over there. He's a proud disabled war veteran. That's us together. So as I was saying, I was visiting him. And at that time, my grandfather had been diagnosed with terminal prostate cancer. And one night he had incessant bleeding, and we had to rush him to the local hospital. There, medical professionals told us that there was no doctor and that they would have to call one in, and that he may not even be available if they called him in. I was shocked. How could this be happening in an EU country? And I remember hearing from family and friends that that is the first cue, the first precursor to suggesting that they are expecting a bribe. The fakilaki. So we gathered 300 euros, and in no time, my grandfather had the doctor, he had the bed, and he was taken care of. But I was so angry. I felt that how could this be happening? I mean, his rights to medical attention, his entitlement as a tax-paying citizen, he was prepared to give his life for his country once upon a time. And now he had been reduced to a simple financial reduction. He had been reduced to a financial gain of a medical professional who was there to take care of him. So, just like my grandfather, these people also feel like their rights have been compromised. These protests are an expression of an exasperated people's loss of control over their uncertain futures. And as we enter our 6th year of recession, these protests have increased, and they are slowly transforming into cries for justice. Because at the center of this crisis lie years of political mismanagement, clientelism, and at the very center of it all lies corruption. Corruption that has robbed us of our resources and has ruined entirely the fertile ground that would provide us with the opportunities that we now lack. We have lost entirely our social compass. But at the same time, we see an increase in a different kind of online participation. We live in a day and age where access to information is immediate, and we seem to also want to demand the same type of accessibility from our governments, right? So we see that there is something that has been dubbed digital democracy that is happening around the world right now, where citizens using online tools such as crowdsourced websites and social media platforms expose, discuss, and monitor and expose violations and talk about other social issues that bother them. Digital democracy is all about doing it by ourselves. And there are some prime examples of this practice, such as WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks is probably the most famous one. Fair Elections EU, this Bulgarian website where voters can come in and report electoral fraud in their areas. And other whistleblowing websites, some in Kenya actually, that people, governments actually, and municipalities make their budgets publicly available information regarding development projects that they're planning to design throughout the year, and people can then go in and say, guess what? That project never happened. Where was this money lost? Was this an abuse of public power? We seem to maintain the checks and balances with our government. But what this also does is that it redefines our role in the way we participate as citizens. We are no longer receivers of services, but we design them. We dictate what happens to us. And we see that governments are warming up to the idea that considering this type of participation even vital to the survivorship of the political system as a whole. Now I want to ask you, what comes to mind when you think of bribery and corruption? Let's take a look. Djibouti, Colombia, India, Benin. Mongolia. Greece. Well, guess what? What do all these countries have in common? They were ranked in the 94th position of this year's Corruption Perceptions Index. Right? So let's take a look at it. What's wrong? Right? It's totally wrong. This feels totally wrong. Here is a developed EU nation ranked among countries that are traditionally associated with corruption. Now let's take a look at this chart. We have selected a few economically competitive countries and some less competitive countries, according to the World Economics Forum Global Competitiveness Report of 2012. And now if you compare these countries, you see that their corruptions, the level of corruption in the most healthy economic macro environments seems to be lower, and vice versa. The less economically competitive countries tend to have higher levels of corruption, Greece being one of them. What does this mean? What is the conclusion? Corruption does not bring prosperity, it brings poverty. And let me say this. Do you really think that people are born corrupt? No. Is it a failure of our value systems? It's a failure of our systems, not our value systems. Systems because the risks are low, the penalties are mild, and the rewards are high. There are many excuses about condoning bribery. 5 common excuses that we hear all the time is, it's everywhere, it's culturally determined, a national catharsis will take generations, it's the grease to the economy's wheels, and change cannot take place until those at the top are replaced. Well, guess what? That's all wrong. Corruption is a calculative crime. It can be reduced to a simple formula. Discretion minus accountability. We can eradicate corruption by working with the variables that we find within this formula. For instance, we can decrease the discretion. What is discretion? One's ability to determine what, when, and if something gets to take place, right? So by reducing the discretion of public officials, we can work towards this goal. A lot of online processes, for example, have done this already. You can apply for permits online, you can apply to register for things online. So you remove the point of contact between yourself and the public official who is likely to ask for a bribe. Now, our brothers from another mother in India have worked and have proven themselves with the section of accountability. Accountability, by increasing accountability in India, they issued these citizens' charters online that people can print. And within these charters that act as guidelines, they show the time frame within which a certain procedure needs to take in order to be accomplished. Let's say you want to get a paper from some sort of public official. Well, it will take X amount of weeks. If your project gets stalled at any point or delayed, you can work back through the workflow, see where the problem is, confront, and ask for accountability. Good job to our friends in India. And Edosa Fakelaki is also based on those principles, the principles of discretion and accountability. For the first time, we have given the tool to you, Greek people, to be able to report instances of corruption anonymously using crowdsourcing technology. Edosa Fakelaki is separated across 4 tabs. Edosa Fakelaki, this is where you come in and report your stories and tell me how, when, where, how much. Then Edosa Fakelaki. Now this is an extremely important section because not all public officials are corrupt. We need to hear about people who do their job honestly, honest officials, right? And it's very important to note here that this section has organically transformed itself into a sense of community. We have people coming in and looking for doctors, for instance, and looking for public officials who don't accept bribes. And that's beautiful, because now we can promote those who need to be promoted and supported for their work. And Katigila Fakelaki, this is what I call the success stories, the educational hub of our website, where people come in and they tell us how they went about reporting their story to the authorities. If I have a similar situation, I can now go in and learn and eliminate my fear factor, understand how he did it, gain encouragement, and do the same thing. And I can ask questions, and they can be answered. There's a dialogue. There's democratic dialogue. It's healthy. And Pira Fakilaki is the nicest one, I think, because systemic change in this country cannot happen unless we don't hear the other side. We need to tap into the rationale of people who do take bribes and understand what are the motivations. Why are you doing this? Tell us so we can move towards progress together as a society. Now, we take your data and we translate it into numbers. So we are founded upon two pillars, data collection and the social awareness aspect. Data collection. We take your stories and we transform it into a visualization of this complex information. We see the market price of corruption. We see the most corrupt public services. We rank the most corrupt regions. And let me take you a step back. When this happened with my grandfather, and I felt very traumatized, I went back to university at Yale as a political science student. I wanted to write about my story, and I wanted to write about corruption in Greece. And I realized that I couldn't do it because I didn't have the right information to support my claims. For instance, how many people resist paying a bribe? What is the average bribe for a diploma οδήγησης? You can answer that, right? So all this was information that I didn't have. So guess what? Now we do. Now Edosa Fakilaki can answer those questions for us. And that's why I want to encourage you today to come in and write your stories if you've ever paid a bribe, because the more data we collect, the more precise our information will be, and therefore the changes that we address and the transparency that will be before us will be more effective. The rankings. Most corrupt public services in Greece. Not surprised, right? The average bribe in each sector. And also keep in mind that some of these might not be accurate, such as why would anyone come in and tell me they paid a bribe to an euphoria? Because they probably did it to gain something in return. So there's a margin of error. But beyond the obvious data collection that we do collect, we also collect some less obvious. So actually, this is interesting. A few weeks ago, I was scrolling through the data and realized that about 20% of all medical reports that were coming from women who had given birth. Okay? Looking deeper into the data and analyzing it and taking averages, I noticed that the natural birth bribe was 45% lower than the average bribe for a cesarean. Now, there have been studies in the past that suggest that doctors in Greece encourage women to undergo unnecessary cesarean procedures for a financial incentive. Those claims could not be supported. And now, perhaps these numbers can shine light on this truth. The social dimension, like I mentioned before, we have created a collective sort of society, an online community, one where we share a common goal, we share solidarity, we support each other. We all have shared our anger. And we promote democratic dialogue. We're addressing it. We're confronting the issue. We're learning from each other. We're informing each other. We are recognizing the situation. We are participating as active citizens. And that is so important, guys, because you know what? If corrupt people could for all these generations stick together and manage to preserve this sick system, so can honest people, right? Exactly. So, Edosa Fakilaki is also part of the I Paid a Bribe International Network, a network of countries using crowdsourcing technology to combat corruption. As you can see, we are with Kenya, India, Pakistan, and Zimbabwe. Greece can proudly say that it is the first EU and developed nation to use this type of technology to address corruption. And Edosa Fakilaki started that. And why do I use the word proud? You know, why would you want to be? Why would you want to say that you're proud to be part of this problem? But you know what? We should be proud, because taking any step towards change should make us proud. And we should feel responsible. Change is in our hand. We need to restore the social contract and basically preserve it for the generations that will come after us. Let us not rob them of their entitlements. And we also need to restore the bridge that has been crumbled into pieces between us and our government. Let us restore faith. Let us not be suspicious of them, and let them not distrust us. Let us work with the government. Let us provide the data and the tools for them to make change happen. Our resources are strapped down at this point, and we need to take action. We are the voice of what we want to dictate for our future. So also at this point, I want to just reach out and say the prime example of active citizenship is Yanis Karabelas and his team, who believed in my idea and made this happen by sponsoring it entirely with their knowledge and their technical expertise. And they are the prime example of active citizenship, because we didn't know each other before that. I found them on the internet, and they thought that this can change the way things are treated in Greece. And I want to thank you guys. So my takeaway message for you is be active, participate, take the problem, make it your own, take the tragedy of the world, make it your own, and be the change you want to see in our country. And most importantly, be the change that you want to see in this world. Thank you. Thank you.